We are live officially now with the recording happening. If you find your way to our weekly thread, our web design announcement for first period, there's a lot of different links. It'll connect here in just a second. There we go. You'll find a variety of different links that we're going to be using and taking advantage of today. So first things first, assignment 5.2, if you click on that link, it will take you to the actual Canvas page, which we'll get into here in just a second, talking about pseudo classes, which is a way to make your CSS respond when certain conditions are met, like if an anchor has been clicked on or a page has been visited, stuff like that. Fonts, just how you can change the fonts on the entirety of your page, and then how you can combine the two for assignment 5.2. Then we'll have some work time today and tomorrow. This is all I have planned for us for this week of Unit 5 at least. And yeah, there's some extra optional stuff if you're interested. If you're interested or looking to find some new kind of tags or new HTML elements to experiment with on your index page, I have linked two web pages here with some HTML effects as well as some CSS animation stuff that you can apply to your index page, the optional decoration portion of the of your root folder for Unit 5. But yeah, if you want to check those out, you are welcome to copy and paste those, experiment with those, just see what, have some fun with them a little bit on your index page on your sandbox there. I also, I don't really need them, but it's just kind of a fun exercise. YouTube thumbnails, so I can put them when I, like if we go to 6 periods class, for example. One second. If you have some downtime, you're finished with all your web design stuff, you're finished with all your other coursework, and you don't, you want to do something constructive, this is what the one of my second period web designers came up with. So it can be jokes, it can be memes. I'm into the, I think it's funny. But then we have, you can see your YouTube thumbnails happening. You can see your hard work displayed. If you want to do something after we've finished 5.2, I'm looking for YouTube thumbnails. All right, so 5.2 is another 2 exercise, but it's all going to be on one HTML page, where we're going to mix these two together, but we're going to focus first on pseudo classes. So what actually are pseudo classes, you may be asking? So we break down the term itself. Maybe you've heard pseudo before, meaning fake, like pseudonym is a fake name, or false or specific, like things like that are all that root word for pseudo. I don't know the exact definition as a developer, but then we think about the word classes. That's our CSS rule or our CSS idea that we can assign a class to something and make it behave differently than something else, make it be more specific in our designing. So when we combine pseudo classes together, we get the idea of extra specific CSS that kind of act as fake classes when only certain conditions are met. So if we go to the replies in the weekly thread, there's 2 links here on pseudo classes, and then we'll get to fonts here in just a second. Here's an example of what pseudo classes actually are mostly used for, as according to W3 Schools. They can style an element when the user mouses over it, like this. Pseudo classes are allowing that mouse button to change to blue while I'm hovering. We can style visited and unvisited links. These are going to be anchor links, ones that you have clicked on before. Think about like if you're on Wikipedia and the links turn purple. When you come back to them, they're still purple. That constitutes a visited link. Whereas new links that you haven't clicked on are blue, that's unvisited. You can use pseudo classes to assign these 2 values. Or typically you want to style an element when it gets focus, which means it's hovered over or full screened or other stuff like that. So the actual syntax for a pseudo class, it belongs in the selector. And you have some terms that you can write out, and I'll show you how to do this in the VS Code. But like for anchors visited, you add a, colon, and then the condition you want it to be styled about, like a visited link, then this styling will appear. In development, in CSS, in computers in general, especially in programming, there's this idea of something called a conditional. A conditional means if a certain condition is met, like the anchor has been visited, then a certain CSS happens. Conditional is also a way to describe something called an if-then statement, because if the condition is met, then the thing happens. And that's our first kind of introduction to that as programmers, as developers, is pseudo classes. All of that is to say, this will make more sense once we get into the demo here, but I'm going to open up VS Code. And then I'm in my my period 1 unit 5 folder. So I go to first period and then unit 5. Just click select folder. We have all the stuff that we did yesterday with our index page and whatever. Here's 5.1, or not yesterday, but during your block day. So I need to make a new HTML file for 5.2. It's going to be exactly the same process as we did for 5.1. With the big rectangle selected, you can either double click and type it out, or you can right click with your middle finger and then go new file and type it out. Or the third option, you can press the paper button with the plus sign, which is what I'm going to do to create that new file. Oops, I clicked away. So we're going to do the same thing that we did for 5.2 or 5.1, excuse me. Full canvas naming scheme, P1, 5.2. And I forgot to add my .html. So this is just a text file. So I'm going to right click on that and go to rename. In case you have the white lines, you can right click and go rename. And then go to the end of your file name and add the extension, the type of file that it belongs to or that it's trying to be. For this case, it's HTML. And then now we have a smart HTML file that we can fill out like we normally do. Okay, so HTML, and then click on the 5. Change the document title to be the canvas name, 5.2. And now we need a style sheet so we can actually start doing our CSS on there. Yeah. Okay, I will check it. All right. So remember, solid means subfolder. When you click on the styles and it's the solid rectangle, we have that subfolder selected. I can either press the paper button with the plus sign, or I can right click with my middle finger on this rectangle and go new file. And then I'm going to go 5.2 style.css and hit enter. 5.2, you don't need any images. You don't need anything like that. So we're just going to close SRC for now. And now inside of my VS Code, since I've closed my other tabs, I just have my empty style sheet and my empty HTML page, except for the basic setup. The last step we need to do, there's two more steps we need to do. We need to link our style sheet by typing link, make our Zelda link here. Inside of the high ref quotes, start with the subfolder, which is usually going to be styles for style sheets. There's both of my style sheets. Since this is 5.2, we want that one. And then we're going to go outside of the quotes here and go TYPE equals text/CSS, just like normal, all HTML stuff that we're used to, just kind of organizing them all still inside of this one main root folder. So what you do next, the final step with our new submission method with everything being in one root folder, is we now have to link this file with its, because the corresponding style sheet will come with it since it's linked right here, it's attached. We need to link 5.2 to our index, to our table of contents by going to our unit 5 index page, or it's just called index.html, the one with all the anchors on it. And then we're going to add a new anchor for this new HTML file that we've created. So you can type A and then hit enter on your keyboard. That's going to auto add your start and end tags and automatically put you inside of the quotes where you can put B. Blakeney or whatever your file is named, and then click on 5.2 here. You definitely need some content so that your anchor actually becomes clickable. Label it with 5.2. You can put ASSN if you really want to get specific for these assignments, but that is the final step in the setup process. After we make the actual file we're going to be working in, we need to connect it back to our table of contents. So the 3 steps you guys should have had or should have accomplished is creating 5.2, the HTML, creating our 5.2 style sheet. You can see it's going to be opening a bunch of tabs here. First step is 5.2 HTML. Second step is 5.2 style. And then finally is relating it all back to the chapter summary, the index page with an anchor so that we can access all of our files all in one spot. So I'm going to close these extra stuff that I don't need because I just want to focus my tabs on my style sheet and my HTML. So I'm going to close 5.1 HTML, unit 5 index HTML, and just get into 5.2. Okay. In the back, you guys are talking quite a bit. Can you wrap that up, please? So this first exercise, which I'm going to make a quick heading in my HTML to separate them. We need to create a web page with the following fonts using pseudo classes. So how you actually do a pseudo class is within your CSS, you are just going to change up the selector, but we actually need some structure to provide the pseudo class onto. So I'm going to just use an anchor, for example. Let me grab a quick link. We'll just do YouTube. C, Control V that in there, and then I'm going to put YouTube like this. If I could spell it. YouTube. Now, if I were to go live on this 5.2 HTML, this YouTube link is going to behave exactly like you would expect it to. Since I visited YouTube, it's going to turn that kind of purplish color, right? And it'll take me to YouTube like normal. But with pseudo classes, we can change the way that the visited link appears, the way the link gets hovered appears. We can do all kinds of cool stuff to make our page just a bit more responsive. And the way that you do that, we're used to writing CSS for anchors just to be anchor and then whatever CSS goes inside of here. In order to make or to use a pseudo class, and there's a list of them on W3 Schools that you can just kind of check out and reference as the as you use these in the future. But if I want my visited links to change color, for example, I would say anchor, because that's my link selector, and then a regular colon, and you can see all of these options pop up, which we're not going to use for the, look at, there's a huge list of pseudo classes. These are all conditions that once they're met, a certain amount of CSS is going to be applied. I just want anchor visited. So I'm just going to type visited. Now I'm writing a rule for the condition of if I've clicked on my link, then this CSS will appear. So if I change the color to purple, well, it's already kind of purple. Let's do orange, something drastically different from what it's used to. Set the font weight to bold. And set the font size to 16 pixels. So if I go live on this, since I visited YouTube before, it's going to be orange. Since that condition of visited is met, it's a lot easier to see on your screen. Sorry about that. But since I've clicked on YouTube before, the condition is met and the CSS is going to apply. You can use these pseudo classes. They come by name, so there's a big list of them, just like in the HTML tag reference. With anchor visited, meaning this is the condition. The selector becomes the if. So if you've gone to an anchor before, then the CSS inside of the container becomes the second part. This is what is going to happen. For some reason, font weight and font size didn't work. So if I close out of my my live server here and run this in the classic sense, let's see. Okay, there's YouTube unvisited. That's the normal link color. When I click on it, right, it loads to YouTube and I refresh this, it's going to turn orange because I've clicked on that link. And that's the first pseudo class that kind of explains how the conditional happens. So if we go to the W3 Schools on pseudo classes, there's a bunch of different options like A on hover. Let's do A hover, for example. Hover is our condition. Hover is the thing that when it happens, if it happens, I mean, then certain CSS is going to apply. So here, if we set the font size to something crazy, like extra, extra large, when I go and meet the condition of hover, so I run and debug here, when I hover over this link, it should increase in font size. The condition's being met, so the CSS inside is being applied. The CSS in this case is just setting the font size to extra, extra large. So I'm just going to delete all this for now. Get rid of this. So we can actually talk about what we're doing on this assignment. So CSS pseudo classes is the W3 Schools is going to walk you through a majority of the examples that you're going to be using most frequently. And there's a bunch of different try it yourself so you can see how it works when you experiment with different pseudo classes. But the big thing with pseudo class syntax is it's always going to be the selector, so the thing you're trying to change, followed by a colon and the name of the pseudo class, and then it's just normal CSS inside of here. Okay, let's talk about the actual assignment here. Exercise number 1. So I'm gonna go to my HTML, H1, enter, and just type exercise. Exercise 1. And then underneath that, I'm gonna add a horizontal line, which is just HR. And now we can get into what exercise 1 is actually asking of us. So, pseudo classes, we're gonna create a web page with the following fonts. Let's focus first on what we know. This is back to our regular kind of HTML habits. Regular text, there's certain elements that are typically defined as regular text, or you could set a rule for the entire body. There's also headlines, and there's also blocks labeled code. So these two pieces, regular text and headlines, are selectors without a class by default. Those are just regular old HTML that we can work with, and you can choose any of your regular text options that you'd like, and we'll get into fonts here in just a second. So we need some regular text on our page. I'm gonna go underneath my H1, and then we'll go here. I'm gonna add some regular text. This is, oh yeah, I can use Lorem. So just type Lorem and then hit enter. Tab actually, yeah. Okay, my beef with Lorem is it makes it super long. Okay. All right, so now we have some regular text. Let's get the actual elements themselves in before we start styling anything too crazy. We need some headlines. We already have a headline right here for exercise 1, but I'll add another one just for good measure. H2, Lorem headline. And then the last thing we need is a block level element labeled code. So what are the block level elements that we're typically using? It's 3 letters. What? When we're creating blocks, when we're creating sections, it's div. Yeah. So we can go underneath H2 and go div.code, div.code. And as long as you see that wrench icon, you hit enter. It's going to add a div in there with a class of code. I'm going to hit enter again. So this becomes a container. And say div with a class of code.
Oh, I thought you could just use like previous. I thought you could just use like previous.
Yeah, pre's good, but div class of code is going to work a little bit better. So if we run this currently, it's just going to look like normal HTML, right? Here's our Lorem paragraph, here's our Lorem headline, and then here's a div with a class of code. Let's get into the pseudo classes for how we can be extra specific. I actually got a little mixed up in my.
But what's the Lorem?
It's just a headline. We need to talk about fonts. I got confused. I'm sorry. So fonts. That's the way you can change the way the text or the CSS you can use to change how text appears on the screen. You can change the different type of fonts. Here's a big list of all the different ones that you can apply with just a little sample text. But before we get into trying to memorize all these names like Snell Roundhand and Luminari and Chalk Duster, like,
Wait.
Yes.
The cursive just content.
No, I'll get to that here in just a second.
Oh.
So
Cursive is not.
there are 2 main types of fonts. That's going to be sans serif, which just means kind of nice looking, and serif. Hold on, I'll get you an example of the 2. The 2 main types of fonts are going to be sans serif and serif. Serif is typically what you think of when you see like fancy fonts. So if I just Google serif fonts, Times New Roman is the classic serif font. If I just go into here, these are going to be all our serif fonts. So a serif is this little tiny like little extra addition that you add to the letters, like the corners on this T on the bottom and the top, the one on the H here, the bottom of the Q, the extra stuff on the R. It's just extra decorations on your text is going to be what's typically known as a serif. So
$46 per month.
Yeah.
What?
The opposite of that, or the lack of that, is called a sans serif font. So if we go into Wikipedia,
D&D.
It's one that does not have any of the extra decorations here. This is not the, come on, give me the picture. So this is a serif font. You can see that on the A and the B, the C, there's no extra fancy decorations. If we go back to the serif font version, the C's got a little bit of shaping here. Let me find, where's the A in the Quick Brown Fox?
Lazy dog.
Yeah, I couldn't see lazy.
Why is
a
that a
mess.
starter? Like, why is it supposed to work?
Because it uses every letter in the alphabet. So look at this A. Give me a capital A.
It does?
It does.
No. There's
You can't find any capital A's. Okay, so if you look at an A right here, it's got these extra decorations. This line is thicker than this line. It's just a lot, quote unquote, fancier than compared to this A, sans serif, which does not have anything like that. So first things first, if we go into our pseudo class here, or if we go into our canvas here, I mean, all of our regular text needs to be set to black Arial. So with CSS fonts, there's a video here explaining it better than I am currently, but there's two main pieces that we need. We need a type, like a serif versus sans serif versus script versus cursive versus whatever. And we also need a font name to actually assign it to. So.
Wait, I already like, is it like, are you supposed to use like the act or something?
Yeah, well, not exactly. So this is the W3 Schools, with a much better example of sans serif versus serif. But actually adding them into your web page is you use something called font family. So if we set a rule for our body, set the font dash family property, it's going to pop up with a ton of different VS Code options here. These are all font names. You've heard of Times New Roman. You've heard of Arial, right? A whole bunch of different ones. Thank you. So with font family, the absolute minimum that you need, we go back to Firefox here, is you need a style of font, like serif or sans serif. So first things first, if we go into our body selector here and on font family, we set it to sans serif and then refresh. Our output is going to change from the default font of Times New Roman down to a sans serif font, which is just straight up and down, a lot simpler, a lot easier on the eyes. This is the bare minimum that you need when you're setting a font family. You have to decide if you want a serif font, a sans serif font, or some of the other options available. So if we go back here, set it to serif, you can see that all the extra additions, if I could zoom in, all the extra additions are here, like on the E, the X, the S, compared to if we set this to sans with no font, or no serif, I mean, it's going to go to a much easier to see display style type without all the fun decorations. So when you're setting a font, you're trying to change the font on your page. The first thing you need to set is that that type of like grouping or family. I always forget what they're actually called. But then what you can do is set specific font names. So 5.2 is asking for all regular text to be black Arial. So we need to set a color, we need to set a font family, and we also need to set a sans serif, edition. So the other, this second link on CSS fonts takes you to the W3 Schools, or W3C, the same one who does the validator, is a big list of fonts with their name and their group. So Arial is right here. It's right at the top. Arial is a sans serif font because it doesn't have any of the extra decorations. So if we're trying to set our regular text, everything on the body, to Arial, we need to put that font name in quotes.
Everything?
All the regular text, yeah.
All the
Yep, you set the font family to Arial in quotes like this, and then you add a comma, and then put the file name right after that. So you can see, because I've put font family of Arial inside of my body here, it's going to affect whatever text-based element I have on my page here. And you can change this to a couple different fonts if you know them by name, like the band font Comic Sans, for example. Should.
No.
No.
Yeah, is it because
Maybe it's not a sans serif. Huh.
I think it's because Comic Sans like the rock.
I don't know. Let's try the other meme font. Let's go Impact.
What is impact the name?
It's the caption meme font. Okay, there we go. So Impact works. All right, you can name these. You can.
Comic Sans named it cursive.
Oh yes, that's right. But you can name a variety of different fonts when you type font dash family for your body selector or for your specific div. There's a whole bunch of different types here that you can work with. And you can just click on, like if we want Arial, you can go right here and then just fill it out for our needs on this page. Yeah, Grace, you have a question?
Regular text like include headline.
Huh?
Does regular text include headline?
It includes every text-based element. Yeah, so that's why I'm setting it for the body rule. Okay, you don't always have to put your font names in quotes. I like to, just to be extra sure. And you can also add backup fonts just in case Arial can't load for whatever reason. And then if Helvetica can't load for whatever reason, it's just going to default to a sans serif font. So we only have about 10 minutes left this morning because the technical difficulties threw me off my rhythm a little bit. That's no fault of y'all's. It's just threw me off a bit, but that's okay. The biggest thing I want you guys to take away from today is how to set up your font family CSS property and the steps that you need to add after that. That is going to be, I'll link it into our agenda here. If we go back to P1 Web Design, I'll add it to this list right here. You can also just Google CSS fonts and it will take you to the W3 schools. And you can go from there. So you don't have to turn anything in today. There's not really much to do besides get your 5.2 style sheet and HTML set up. Other than that, we'll pick this up tomorrow and continue working on it from there. Let me finish up the Zoom room and I'll be right there.
Okay.